Hello guys, it's Mark, the Bowlerhat Farmer. Now, 2 weekends ago we had the opportunity to go and speak down at Cheltenham, and over 200 people in the room. There were some other guest speakers there, including Sandi Adams, who was talking about the WEF, how they got formed, who was behind it, the 2030 agenda, what's actually in play with that. And I've got a copy of that video now sent to me, which I'm going to put up, and I want you guys to have a look through it. If you're new to the channel and you're not sure what the 2030 agenda actually looks like, then listen to what Sandi's got to say. You'll learn a lot. I've been following this journey for some time, and it's scary. So we've got a bank of these speeches, all on different subjects, which we're going to put up. So don't forget, like, share, and ring the bell. And if you want to make a donation at thebowlerhatfarmer.com to keep the tour on place, that'd be lovely. Listen to what Sandi's got to say. See you in a while.
Ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning. Well done. First hurdle cleared. I was going to open with a Tommy Cooper joke, and I talked myself out of it, thinking it might be the wrong crowd. And then I thought, well, if the government can make U-turns, so can I. So here we go. A lady walked into a butcher's shop and pointed to a place behind the butcher's head, saying, "May I have some of those cuts from up there, please?" And the butcher turned round and said, "Terribly sorry, madam, the stakes are too high." Brings us very neatly to the purpose of today, of course. My name's Charles Malet. I work for and help run an organisation called UK Column, which provides an independent news service, and I'll speak a little bit more about that as the day goes on. Now, you've all made it here, and that is very significant in itself, in its own right, and that is something that we must make sure that we capture and we make the most of it. You must go away from here feeling you have achieved something today, you have learnt something, and you have established personal connections that are going to be meaningful. So on that note, I'm going to ask you to do something that a British audience would never normally do, and that is to turn to your left, your right, your front, your rear, and introduce yourself to the people who are around you. Get to know them, say hello, but you don't have that long to do it. Hello. I'm Charles, hello.
I'm Gloria.
Hello, Gloria. That bit seems to have gone very well. Fantastic. Okay, I joke slightly about that. Obviously, it turns into a bit of a gingangooli, but actually, it's very, very significant that you do make those connections, because otherwise, what is the point? Why are we here otherwise? The only reason to assemble en masse in person is to make those connections, and those are the things you have to take away today. You must make this count, okay? So please hold that close. Now, today, there are many people to be credited with putting this on, but I should like to mention, in particular, Kay, and Richard, and Louise, Marcus, Dave, and Joe. I'm sure there will be people that I haven't mentioned. They know who they are. I apologise if I have skipped their names. But please, let's consider how much effort goes into putting on these things, and indeed the credit that should be due to them. They are also people who They have obviously committed significant funds to make this happen as well. So if you are in a position to be able to provide support where it's due, then that would be great. I should also say that Kay has asked that I say that if you are in a mind to do such a thing, then actually it would be the Food Finders Hub really that deserves support. But I'm not going to steal Mark Byford's thunder. He will talk exactly about that later. So, but just to sow that seed in your mind, please. I think a big question to ask is, what do we really mean by food security? This country has not enjoyed a state of self-sufficiency in food since the early 19th century, and we live in an age where 2/3 of the adult population of the country are overweight, and a half of those are obese. The food industry wastes approximately 1/3 of what it produces, and then 1/3 of what's taken away by the consumer is wasted in the home. So we have no shortage of food, and yet we are consistently reminded that there is an issue with the cost of food, with which I would agree, but I'll qualify that statement because I believe when we look back in time that it must be beyond coincidence that the National Health Service Act of 1946 contains within its provisions of Part 4 access to pharmaceutical drugs for those undergoing general medical care, and they are, of course, much more likely to be in need of such care due to the price guarantees of the 1947 Agriculture Act, which has driven the industrialisation of farming. So it's astounding, really, that the very companies producing the chemicals that enable the industrialisation of farming are also creating the pharmaceutical products that humans are supposed to ingest to correct the effects. How much more obvious can it be? So I would say that the cost of eating the refined and processed and over-chemicalised hormone-induced foods of the industrialised farming process is indeed your health. Of course, there is a cost. And when we look back to those legislative inputs, it is very clear that the government is not your friend and cannot be your friend in this regard. So we'll get into some of that later, and I don't want to derail the timings that I've set out myself. That would be a bad start. So without too much more ado, I will hand over to Sandi Adams, who I'm sure many of you will be familiar with. But if you're not, just a very quick recap. Sandi had a significant career in the corporate world, so she knows of what she speaks. And for a couple of decades now, she has been investigating to a very, very, very thorough degree the machinations of, in particular, the United Nations through Agenda 21 and the rollout of the Sustainable Development Goals, but in particular, the undue influence that they have on our everyday lives, particularly at the lower levels of what we regard as being local democracy. She is also, I'm very pleased to say now, a co-presenter at UK Column. So please welcome Sandi Adam.
Lovely. Well, thanks for coming today. Wow, it was really good to see such a full hall. I'm going to obviously try and get everything done, in time, because I know we're a bit time restricted. Now, really what I want to say today is, we have got a problem. Are there any farmers in the audience? Put your hands up. Excellent. We've got farmers. Wonderful. Yay! Thank you so much for coming. Wow. Well, really, what I wanted to say is I'm going to briefly go through the history, because a lot of you won't know the history. I've been talking about the history of Agenda 21, and it became 2030 and 2015 for a very long time. And, it's now, I believe that, people are, I was always the nutter, the crazy woman. And I think it's now, people are beginning to realise, I still am a bit crazy, but hey, that wouldn't be me without that. Anyway, I just want to say that this, is a long-term plan, very, very long-term plan. So how did we get here? Yeah, and how it all began. Well, years ago, in the 1930s, there was a massive depression in America, and the stock exchange fell. And there was a whole bunch of technocrats in Columbia University who decided to reinvent the wheel, and they wanted a technocratic society. There was a guy. It was a guy called M.K. Hubbard, who was the peak oil guy, there was a bunch of them all got together in Columbia University, and they set up something called Technocracy Inc. Now, Technocracy Inc. was quite a big movement in the 1930s, between 1930 and 1947. And what they were trying to do is get rid of the price-based economy and to replace it with an energy-based economy. Now, that's interesting because that's what's happening now. And it was all based on the fact that they whether it was a real movement to get rid of the depression. They said that, they were fed up with politicians and bankers, and aren't we all? And this was the alternative. But unfortunately, it would have turned into, and it is now, a technocratic dictatorship. And that's where it all started in 1930. So from then on, you've got Elon Musk's great grandfather, Joshua Haldeman, was part of this movement. And he was a very strange man. He wasn't strange, he was a maverick. Just like Elon, he was a maverick. But he just wanted to further this technocratic movement. And so the war was happening at this, from 1930 onwards to about 1944. The move for this movement kind of died a bit because the war was a big distraction. And what happened is that the Technocracy Inc. had a big push to really further this technocratic movement, and they held a massive, great push in 1947 to get everybody on board with this technocratic movement. But it was all a little bit strange because, as you see, they held this thing called the Grey Convoy, which was cars. And they had the logo, which is Technocracy Inc., the future is now. And they got this convoy to go from, I think it was California to Vancouver, a bit like the truckers' convoy, the same route. And they stopped at Joshua Haldeman was heading this up. He's Elon Musk's great-grandfather. Great-grandfather. And they stopped at every Masonic temple on the way. To push this, every single Masonic temple. The Masons of America financed this, and they had a big searchlight. They called it the all-seeing eye to get people to come to this particular temple and hear about the technocratic movement. And anyway, it died a death. People weren't ready. Really, the war was over. They weren't ready to give up capitalism for this particular. Interestingly, Elon Musk's great-grandfather, Joshua Haldeman, he set up a party called the Social Credit Party, and that's what he was pushing. So it's all very interesting when you realise that this has gone on for so long. Where Elon Musk, fits into this, don't ask me. Make your own minds up. But anyway, I just want to talk about the United Nations now, because obviously the United Nations was put together after the war. First of all, it was the League of Nations, and then that was replaced with the United Nations. And who's behind the United Nations? Well, in 1949, I think it was, Nelson Rockefeller borrowed 8 point something million off his father, J.D. Rockefeller, and they built the United Nations building on the banks of the river in New York. So really, who's behind the United Nations? It's Rockefellers. They started it all. Not many people know that. Now, I want to talk really about, how did we get to this point where big corporations are owning everything on our planet at the moment? You've got BlackRock and Vanguard. Well, in 1944, just before the war ended, there was a big intelligence report that went out, and it's the Nazis' plan to Fourth Reich by creating a European economic order by bankrolling industrialists to take control of nation states in Europe. So what happened, it was called the Red House Report, and the SS officers after the war all got together. They distanced themselves from Hitler because he wasn't winning the war. They had decided we would win the war a different way. We will win the war by the United States bankrolling all the big corporations of Germany, and they would actually set up big corporations. That is how they would win the war. And what happened is they met in the Red House, I think it was in August 1944. And the Red House is in Luxembourg, it's Strasbourg, and it's a hotel. And the SS officers met there with and they invited the major corporations. You can look this up. Look up the Red House report. Don't believe anything I say. Do your own research. And they said, we will not win the war militarily. We will have to take over it with big corporations. And they bankrolled all these big corporations like IG Farben, all the pharmaceuticals, everybody, to literally take over the world. And that's what we're living with now. It's the legacy of what happened then. So have I missed anything else out? No, it was things like Krupp's, Daimler, Benz, all of those big corporations got together, and the United States bankrolled them. So it's really a big plot to take over the world then. Now, after that, it's a bit of a timeline. You get to 1968 when the Club of Rome was formed. And the Club of Rome really is a crisis think tank. It's there, to literally, they create crises, and it's problem, reaction, solution. Global crises need global solutions. And they come up with the solutions. They cause the crises, and they get the solutions. Now, it was set up by a guy called Aurelio Peccei, who was the head of the club at the Trilateral Commission at the time, and they set it up from his home in Italy. That's why it's called the Club of Rome. It was actually they've had their first meeting in his home in I think it was Bellagio in Italy. So they're very, very powerful people. They're the movers and shakers who kind of, make everything happen, and they create the crises in order for us to, in order to create the problem and then the solution. They come up with it. So that's what we're living with. Have I missed anything out? No. They say global problems require global solutions. That's 1968. Now, there were various Club of Rome reports that and the Club of Rome published all the reports that made the bones of Agenda 21 at the time. Now, Agenda 21 was launched at the Earth Summit in 1992, but there were three major Club of Rome reports that preceded that. And that really, these Club of Rome reports are the bones of Agenda 21. Limits to growth. This was a report really all about population control, and they were basically saying in this Club of Rome report, there's too many people on the planet, there's not enough resources to go around, therefore we have to control population. That report that I gave you, just that one there, that was a really pretty awful one in 1969. It was the report to the president, and it was all about population and how they would actually use wars to keep population down. Obviously, we had the Vietnam War and all sorts of things going on. So there's a lot in that. If you get a copy of it, I've got a copy of it. It called for the US population to be culled to under 100 million people by 2050. And it was published by the Club of Rome, Trilateral Commission, IMF and World Bank, with a foreword by Jimmy Carter. So it was the report to the president. And it was really, as a result, it was agreed to lower the birth rate and to increase the death rate. I mean, pretty awful stuff. And I won't look at the Deagle report because that's supposed to be the population of the world in 2025, which is now. I don't want to depress you because I don't believe this will happen, but they do. They published a report. It's a CIA website called Deagle. They really, talk about hardware, military hardware. But for some reason, in 2014, and I used to put this in my talks in 2014, they published that the population of the UK and other countries like the United States and Europe would significantly be reduced. And that, the population of the UK, which I'll mention now, was at that time about 65 million. They said that by the end of 2025, it would be 14 million. Now, how did they get to that? And we have to hold it in our minds that that will not happen because it hasn't happened as yet. It's 2025. We have to hold that in our hearts, okay? Yes, and now in 1970, Zbigniew Brzezinski decided to reignite the technocracy movement of the 1930s. So these things never go away. He was always there. He was there at Columbia University at the same time. And he's a big mover and shaker in geopolitics. He's dead now. But there's always someone else to take over, though. Anyway, he reignited it. Now, the last Club of Rome report before the Earth Summit was this one. Now, this is called Our Common Future. And it's all really about how it was written by Gro Harlem Brundtland. She was the president of Norway at the time, and she wrote this with Maurice Strong, who was the guy he was the grandfather of Agenda 21. And anyway, this was all about how we could make the world more equitable. How do we level up the whole world? Well, we make everybody equally poor. That's what we're seeing now. And this is what this was all about. It was about levelling up the entire population of the world. And what they noticed, they said, the West has to stop being so successful. We've got to transfer that wealth to India and China, which is what happened in 1987. We were, again, it's the whole foreign aid thing. We were there and quite rightly, it's nice to be able to help other countries. There's no way I think that's a bad thing. But in this case, it was really to finance the whole tech industry of India and China. And their emissions went sky high, but we in the West were being sanctioned for emissions. And that was very, very clear at the 2015 Paris Climate Conference, where they had to actually, it was never an agreement, it was always an accord. They couldn't get an agreement because Trump walked out and said, I'm not having any of this. And there loads of scientists were saying, no, this isn't right. The emissions from India and China are sky high, and we should not be sanctioned in the West. So that's the story behind that. So they got it all in a bag. They got population, they got the whole levelling up thing of the world. Now, the final one, before the Earth Summit, is this one. Now, this is called The First Global Revolution, and it's written by two founder Club of Rome people, of course, Alexander King and Bertrand Schneider. Now, this is really interesting. This is the one where they identified how to get this crisis going. How could they get a crisis that would unite humanity under a common threat and and find an enemy? They needed to find an enemy. Now, this book is all about scapegoating, finding enemies, and finding a common threat in a nutshell. So you don't have to read it. I did. So, on page 108, it says, the need for enemies seems to be a common historical factor. States have striven to overcome domestic failure and internal contradictions by designating external enemies. The scapegoat practice is as old as mankind itself. When things become too difficult at home, divert attention by adventure abroad. Bring the divided nation together to face an outside enemy, either a real one or one invented for the purpose. There you go. Now, they found their enemy. they found their enemy on page 115, which is us. In searching for a new enemy to unite us, we came up with the idea that pollution, the threat of global warming, water shortages, famine, and the like would fit the bill. In their totality and in their interactions, these phenomena do constitute a common threat which demands the solidarity of all people. All these dangers are caused by human intervention, and it's only through changed attitudes and behaviour that they can be overcome. The real enemy, then, is humanity itself. So, if you feel that we are being targeted and really beaten down, it's because they've targeted us as the enemy, and we're not. Because we don't cause global warming. Anthropogenic global warming does not exist. Yes, it might be warming. It might be the solar system warming up. It might be all sorts of geological things or planetary things, but it is not the human being. And that's why we feel as though we are actually being treated like an enemy. Now, then, of course, after this, where they thought, let's use anthropogenic global warming as the vector to bring in world control, and that's exactly what they did. We had, now I haven't got my Agenda 21 book here with me, but this is it. It's a 42-chapter document. You can read it, but it's all sugar-coated and in United Nations speak. But basically, it is all about bringing the world under a sort of global warming biodiversity dictatorship, basically, and that the humans have ruined the earth, so therefore we've got to pay the price. So, who is Maurice Strong? Well, this is he's the grandfather of Agenda 2030, or 21 and 2030. I don't know whether he lived to see 2030. Yes, he did, actually. We may get to the point where the only way of saving the world will be for industrial civilization to collapse. Isn't it our responsibility to bring this about? Well, that's what's happening now. This is in 1992. Now, this man is, he was an oil billionaire. He worked for the Rockefellers for 17 years. He's not, he actually got done for the oil for food scandal. He's a bit of a crook. He loved China. He got done for the oil for food scandal with Adnan Khashoggi, where the UN Security Council found that there'd been financial, something going on really bad, basically. And he was facing jail. This is after the Earth Summit. And he ended up fleeing to China. He loved Mao. He was very good friends with Mao Zedong at the time, and he ended up staying there until he died to avoid jail. So he was a big crook, really, and he was the grandfather of Agenda 21 because actually, at the Earth Summit, all of the oil billionaires got together with the bankers, the NGOs, all the climate lobbyists, everybody. They had all invested already in the carbon credit banks. That's what they were going to make a fortune. They were going to clear up with the whole carbon scam. So, and the Prince Charles was there. Yeah, yes, he was there. Prince Charles, there he is. That's Václav Havel, and there's Klaus Schwab. This is 1992. He really is the head of the snake, because the year before, in 1991, he'd brought Royal Yacht Britannia into Rio de Janeiro harbour, and he'd hosted a big party for all these people, for all the big NGOs and all the big corporations, because he'd already set up the Prince of Wales Business Forum, and that is the model for the public-private partnerships that we're seeing now. This man has done more to destroy his own country, of which he's the king, than any other monarch has ever done. And he's an absolute disgrace. Yeah. Thank you. These public-private partnerships, this is, they are actually, destroying representative government. And we're seeing this with the Global Covenant of Mayors coming in. They will be representing the public-private partnerships. They won't be representing the people. So I'm just quickly going through these. Now, after the Earth Summit, they published this. Now, there you are. There's, I think, probably got the only one in this country. But I bought this about 15 years ago. And it is an inventory, a control and inventory of every resource on the planet and how they are going to manage it. So it's quite extraordinary. And on page 993 of that, you've got, they talk about the Wildlands Project of America, which I don't know whether I've got a picture of it. Yes, I do. Yeah, this is the Wildlands Project of America. This was a project that the Global Biodiversity Assessment encompassed. It was a project by a guy called David Foreman, who was the head of Earth First. As you know, we know Earth First. They gave birth to Extinction Rebellion, Just Stop Oil. Now, all those, mainly it's colour-coded in yellow and red. That's where the people aren't allowed to be in their plan, right? This was published, about 1992. So the red bits, core reserves, little or no human use. The yellow bits are buffer zones, highly regulated use by military and federal. And the normal use are the little dots, you see? See the little green dots? Well, those are the human settlement zones, which they reference in this book. Human settlement zones. And the pink ones are Indian reservations, and the grey ones are military reservations. Well, unfortunately, that was their vision. And we're seeing a little bit of this, they haven't really hit their targets. They're still trying to set up the 15-minute cities, the smart cities. In the UK, they're trying to really restrict our movement with geofencing and all sorts of stuff that's going on in the 15-minute cities. They're really pushing for this, but they didn't get it done really as quickly as they would. We've got to remember they are failing all the time. They've missed so many targets. They were supposed to have reached, they wanted to reach this by 2000. They called it they had 8 millennium goals to be reached by 2000. The 8 millennium goals didn't happen. So then they had to reinvent the wheel and invent the 17 goals in 2015. So I'll get on to that. Now, this is Bill Gates' equation for the depopulation based on CO2. And he even said, with better vaccines, we can actually, control the population. So it's a nonsense. It's people times services per person. So it's all an energy-based economy that he wants to create. And of course, all over the world, they hold these world wilderness conferences. They held one in Jaipur in 2020. They've held them every year since then. I happened to do this slide in 2020. But it plans to rewild 50% of the Earth by 2050. It's co-hosted by China, and it unveils a global leadership committee. So they hold these conferences on how they're going to depopulate and how they're going to literally rewild the Earth, the same as that map. Okay. Now, in 2015, things hadn't moved fast enough, so they decided to relaunch the whole idea again and create the 17 goals of Agenda 2030. And that's why it's called 2030. It's Agenda 21, but with a deadline of 2030. And the Pope and President Obama got together in Rome, and they launched these 17 goals that were going to save the world. And it all sounded so sugar-coated and wonderful. That's the 17 goals. Now, if you go to my website, I'll show you a slide at the end. I've published exactly what these goals are, what the UN say they are, and what the real goals are. So if you go to my website, sandiadams.net, they're all on there. And do sign up to my newsletter because it'll be ongoing. I've only just revamped my website because I'm terrible at doing things like that, and I've just done it. So all the goals are on there, along with a lot of other stuff, and a lot of the stuff that I've talked about today. They've got various goals, like, end hunger, which means, sort of literally Monsanto taking over all our food, and really the whole horrible food thing, which I'll go into. farmers are being incentivised to give up their land to renewable energy, such as solar, wind farms, housing, rewilding, no food production, and businesses on their land like glamping and herbal lays. And we've seen the farmers being de-incentivised. They're about to have, by 2027, the sustainable farming incentive becomes even less. What was, the money they were getting, when we were in the EU, was taken away and replaced with the sustainable farming incentive. And farmers are now being encouraged to not farm because it's not biodiverse. Things like keeping livestock, all that kind of stuff, and they've got to, have everything on their land that is actually not farming. They're being incentivized not to grow food and not to keep livestock, which is what farming is all about. So where does our food come from? That's the problem. There's no consideration for food security in all of this. All of the the incentives from the government is really about environmentalism, and it's not about food. Our whole world started really changing when obviously COVID hit. But prior to that, in 2019, Klaus Schwab had got together. Things weren't moving fast enough again with 17 girls, and he got together in the United Nations, and he hatched a plan, and it was to really to push forward with the 17 goals. And one of the it was called the UN Forum Partnership, and they needed to really make it move on. And one of the big things that were on the list, along with obviously empowering women and all this gender equality and all this stuff, one of them was digital cooperation, and it was the biggest one, because 4 months later they held Event 201, and they created a fake pandemic, which actually became a reality. And who was there? Bill and Melinda Gates. They had the same people from the World Economic Forum, the UN, but the added bonus was Bill and Melinda, and they said, "Oh yeah, we've got a vaccine." And so they got their digital cooperation, because while we were all asleep during the lockdown, all of the infrastructure went in. The biometrics went into the supermarkets. The 15-minute cities kicked off. Everything happened after that, really, while we were sleeping during lockdown. So, and this is the whole technocratic agenda. So there's a lot of things like, this report came to me in 2020, and it was all, it was interesting because it's a new production methods really in agriculture, automation and autonomous farming, insect biomass. It's all in this document. Do have a look at it. It's from the food and drink sector and agricultural productivity. It's a very interesting document for any farmers to look at. And of course, the farmers must have read The Path to Sustainable Farming 2024, which literally puts the nail in the coffin for all farmers. It's horrendous. It's about phasing out their subsidies and literally telling them not to farm because it's not biodiverse. So do look at the sustainable farming, the path to sustainable farming and agricultural transition plan 2021 to 2024. That is really awful. I want to just talk about the Sainsbury's Future of Food report. Horrendous. If you can, look at it, because it's extraordinary. It says the CEO of Sainsbury's said, in the future, farmers won't exist. The supermarkets will produce all the food for the future using AI technology. And in this, you've got, sort of Claire Hughes of the Quality and Innovation at Sainsbury's said by 2069, working alongside our suppliers, we predict to have introduced foods like jellyfish and patch dinners. They've got this mad idea about the future of food, and it's not actually going to be in the farmers' hands. The big corporations want to create the food, and it will be horrible food. It will be Franken food. So we're looking at, here we go. Sorry, I'm just trying to rush through this because I know we're short of time. basically, we're looking at a land grab of monstrous proportions with our farms. It's assumed power by government agencies. We've got solar and wind farms, rewilding projects, farmers forced to quit to sell off their land. We've got planning and infrastructure bill coming in. I don't know, have any of the farmers looked at the planning and infrastructure bill? Because this is taking compulsory purchase on, literally on steroids. They have the right now to compulsorily purchase your land for housing in the public interest. This is really, really serious stuff. Look at this bill. I'll put it up in a minute. But it's called the Planning and Infrastructure Bill. And also we've got something that Natural England. Natural England. People think they're a nice sort of like wildlife body. They're not. They're sponsored by the government. The powers from DEFRA were taken away and given to Natural England. They are literally a for-profit organisation, and they are the ones bringing in something called sites of scientific interest, and that is how they're seizing land. Natural England have the power to seize any farmer's land to say, there's a spider or there's a little furry animal on that land that you have not been looking after. So therefore, we're seizing that field, or that could be 5 fields, it could be all your land, whatever. And, there's a farmer I spoke to in Devon last week, and he had the same thing. They came along and they seized his land because there was this spider that they got very excited about, this rare spider. And for 5 years, they gave him below market rent for this land. And the spiders died because actually they enjoyed the biodiversity of the livestock that were on that land. So, it's all a nonsense. It's a land grab. We know it. They're making all sorts of excuses to steal the land, and we have to oppose it with all our might. Yeah, that's it. It's called the Planning and Infrastructure Bill. Look at it. It's horrendous. And it has to be opposed, really. It really does. And there's Natural England, sites of scientific interest. Look at that, look it up. And see what a site of scientific interest is, because they are getting more powerful. And in fact, there's an MP somewhere in Cornwall who actually challenged their power and said, look, we must have this. We can't have this NGO, it's not an NGO, it's actually a government-sponsored body, seizing land off farmers and off anybody, anybody where they want to build a housing estate. So, there's my website, sandiadams.net, and do look up. You can just sign in and look at the 17 goals and understand what they're really about, because what's presented to you is absolutely not what is real. I'm going to leave it there.
Sandi, thank you very much indeed. That's fantastic. Thank you. Amazingly, for an event like this, we are actually slightly ahead of time, but we'll not be complacent. We will go into questions. I'll just pick up on a couple of things, though, because this is, this is so important. And if this stuff is coming across as new to you, and you think it seems a bit far-fetched, then consider this. You can write within your parish council what's called a local plan, and that is supposed to inform the planning that happens within that area. So you can say, we have made X provision for this, so you're able to resist the next level up. If they want to say, we are going to foist this onto, let's say, particularly within the remit of housing development, it's probably, and definitely at national government level, unqualified. There is no mathematical evidence for picking a particular figure out of the air with regard to housing. So you can write your local plan and you can say, well, we've done this, we've decided that we think this is right for our area, and you submit it. It goes one up to the district council, and if it doesn't accord with this stuff, the district council won't ratify it, and therefore it is not valid. And if you follow that up the chain, you will find in every piece of legislation that determines this references to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So this does affect everybody, and whilst it might seem like bits of string on the wall connecting back to people like Maurice Strong, it is very real and it is there. So that is one part. Another thing is, when you look back to the creation of the United Nations building, for example, how come it is always the same people with these Malthusian ideas about population that hold uncontrolled power and unaccountable authority over these planning organisations? It might be one thing to think, well, the United Nations has our best interests at heart. If it weren't for the fact that the United Nations receives money other than that given to it by its member countries, it is privately funded. So there is a massive conflict of interest, not just with the United Nations, but with so many of these organisations that are supposedly acting responsibly for us all. Now, just to go back to, again, the sort of language used and how much of this is a marketing exercise, regardless of your views on whether or not anthropogenic climate change is a thing or not, I would draw your attention back to 1970, when the then newly invested Prince of Wales said in his speech about the Countryside Award in Wales that he feared that talking about ecology and diversity was going to seem like a craze which would lose people's interest. He realised back in 1970 that you had to have something that was going to capture people's imaginations in the long term and make them fearful. And it's exactly what Sandi's talking about, and it has come to pass. Then the other thing, in terms of effect and being led by the nose, as indeed most farmers have been forced into a position of being by virtue of the fact that they have had conditions set where they cannot exist without subsidy. Last year, when Steve Barclay introduced the current iteration of the Sustainable Farming Incentive, in my capacity as a journalist with UK Column, I challenged him to say, what do you think is going to be the result of offering a carrot for not producing food and taking the money versus the risk? Do you think that is going to result in a decrease of land that is producing food? DEFRA, in their infinite wisdom, said, we do not expect there to be any change whatsoever. So the system was completely uncapped. By April of last year, they had restricted it to 25% of overall acreage, by which time the uncropped arable area in England had increased by 107%. That was 568,000 hectares were taken out of production purely by what was described as a miscalculation. Absolutely wasn't a miscalculation. Who could have sat there in DEFRA and thought, yeah, no one's going to go for this. They'll try and keep growing stuff and risk it with the weather and with the pricing and all the rest of it. They won't take the money. Of course they will. So this is absolutely all very deliberate. And the other thing, just finally, sorry, before I hand over to Sandi for questions, is the bodies like Natural England, like the Forestry Commission, they have no upper limits. They don't have metrics for success. And I know that because I've spoken to them. And they don't understand that with the left hand, one thing is happening, and with the right hand, another thing is happening. The twain shall never meet, and that again is entirely deliberate. So Natural England, which is full of well-intentioned people who believe they're doing the right thing, don't know whether or not they've achieved what they're setting out to achieve. Because for them, the sky is the limit. And that in itself is a massive problem when you think about how that pushes land to be used for one purpose or the other. And finally, sorry to bang on, but on food security, who thinks that food security is something that the government is committed to that is enshrined in law? Good. At least I don't have to explain that one. But food security is only mentioned 3 times in any bit of primary legislation in this country, and never before 2016. So in pieces of legislation pertaining to Scotland in 2016 and 2024, and the Agriculture Act in England 2020, And even then, it only says so in relation to being given consideration to when funding farming schemes for other purposes. So the point is that food security is never, ever a primary or even secondary consideration for the very ministry that is saying that it promotes it. Okay, I know a lot of you probably know that already, so I'm sorry about the sucking eggs thing, but it's just to make the link between what Sandi has been going through and what is actually the case on the ground, and therefore how purposeful and how deliberate this actually is. Anyway, so
I just wanted to just mention also, that wildlands map. What I'm seeing is it coming, with things like the right to roam and the fact that farmers on Dartmoor and Exmoor have been restricted in their livestock grazing, all that kind of stuff. You can see that they're trying to lock off the countryside from the human activity, and that is exactly what they set to achieve in 1992. And before. And also, I got a call from somebody, a text from somebody in New South Wales in Australia, and 73 state forests have been shut down to human access. Yeah, not some of them have been shut down completely, some of them have been restricted. We've got things like managed retreat going on in Australia. They're going to try and do the same with the Somerset Levels, where they're going to ingress the water into saying that it's sea level rise, and that's what they're doing in Australia and New Zealand. They call it managed retreat. People are losing their land on the coastline, and they're going to try and do the same here with the flooding and the what they call flood resilience, which is a nonsense because it's designed not to flood. Anyway, there we are. Questions?
Question, yeah.
It's going to be an opposite question. How do we actually oppose it? Because from what I see, we can write all the letters we want.
Yeah.
The government want to do what they do, and they will enforce it.
How many people here engage with their local councils? A few, that's good. That is the only way. Now, years ago, I used to follow this lady in America called Rosa Corey. Sadly, she passed away. But her big thing was you can only fight it in your locality. And I think she's absolutely right. And as Charles said, you can oppose, look at your local plan. Your local plan is all about housing development. It can be stopped, but you have to go through the right channels. They really bank on us not going to our local councils because we're so busy. And really engage with your local councils. Make a noise. I made a noise in my local council, and now they're beginning to turn around. I never thought it would happen. It's a green council. The last couple of weeks, they're beginning to turn around and seeing the bigger picture. And that's our job, is to actually show our councils, because these people are well-meaning and they think they're doing the right thing. They have to realise they are not. They're actually working for the dark side, but they don't know it.
Excuse me, can't you do that at county level? Then that would be...
Yeah, county level's better. I mean, actually, your local council have limited capacity, but certainly at county level, go to your county, your bigger. Unfortunately, I haven't had time to go into devolution, but devolution is a bit of a nightmare because they've got this global covenant of mayors who are their only reason for existing is to produce net zero by 2050, and unfortunately, they will have more powers than Westminster. The powers from Westminster are being given to these global, they're called the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy. And this is what devolution's about, because these mayors, they're trying to devolve England into about 7 regions. Instead of 360 councils, they're trying to devolve them into 7 regions. And these mayors will be in charge, and they'll be pushing forward to make your life a misery. Climate lockdowns, you name it. That's what they aim to do. We have to stop the Global Covenant of Mayors taking over this devolution process. That's the way they're doing it.
Sorry, just in front of you, but just very quickly on that point. How does that work then with Bristol, where they've just introduced an LTN under cover of night with police protection, and they put it up in the same way as they put up the Berlin Wall?
Exactly.
The same tactics. And those people have all protested using the right channels.
What's the LTN?
Well, far be it from me to incite people to...
Sorry, just one second.
Yeah, stop me.
The question was what to do about a low traffic neighbourhood that's been set up in Bristol overnight with police protections. Basically, that means that people's movement is now physically restricted according to which streets they can drive along at what times of day, etc. What can be done?
I think mass non-conformity, don't pay the fines, don't, I think this has to be fought at a mass level, because the trouble is that if only a few people object or don't conform to this, then it doesn't work. We actually need a mass, no from everyone in this country. And don't ask me how we'd go about that, but I think we need literally a force behind it. Yeah.
Hi, Tracy Worcester.
Oh, Tracy.
I think it'd be quite good if by the end of the day, lots of people had shared what they do, so that we can support each other in what we actually do already. Because although the speakers are brilliant, I bet you everybody in this room is doing something that needs support. The other thing that I find a lot is that people say, oh, isn't it good if we can keep the oil in the soil? But actually, is it right to think that there is as much energy being used, if not more, now, even though they say it's to reduce CO2? So all the AI, everything that's going to make this world.
Yeah. These data centres they're going to build all over our country are using up masses of energy, masses. I mean, we all know it's a nonsense. None of it makes sense, and it's not meant to, because it doesn't, and it never has. Renewable energy doesn't work. Yeah, we're covering our land, our priceless arable land and livestock land with renewable windmills, turbines and solar farms. It's awful. Doesn't even meet the national grid.
Over the last few years, I've been up at the barn in Ledbury, and over the last few years, I've been fighting with the council for 5 years, and everything they've heard has been about to challenge loads and loads of things, even to the Secretary of State, planning permission now, licence, everything. Now, the local council in Ledbury has been endemic of a few people, and they make it incredibly difficult for anybody, newcomers, to come in and make a change. And this has been going on for years. And the problem is, the people in the town, if you talk to anybody, it's like, oh yeah, the local council, waste of time, they're just wasting their money, they bicker, they infight, and they're just wasting their money. But things will never change. Hereford Council, exactly the same thing. It doesn't matter what you do, whether you're applying for planning permission as a small individual person, the big companies just walk in and just do whatever they want. All this is, happening all the time. So individually, it's really, really hard to make a difference, incredibly hard, as I know. But the one good thing that we ought to be doing is just not paying our council tax. Everybody just say, no, forget it.
Yeah.
That word out, which I do as a barn, to just everybody who comes in. Not all the people who had the vaccination and sort of gone along with the system, but everybody now is getting disillusioned, one by top government and local government, and even just the Ledbury Town Council, Hereford Council. They're all fed up with the lies that they've been given, the awful service that they're given. So I think the thing would be a real target to get, as that lady said, to link up everybody. But we've all been divided by social media.
Exactly.
By Telegram, by Instagram, Facebook, everything there, and all the social media. And little groups have been set up, and they have their little infights and arguing, because we've been divided into divided and divided. And that's what their master plan is, to divide us all the time.
Yeah.
But as that lady said,
Always.
we all get together and convince everybody else, look, this is absolutely awful. Let's start off by sacking the council off and putting some decent people.
So you do what Lynn Franks has come up with the idea. You go to your councillors and you say to them, yeah, it's great on your agenda, you want to do this, but actually we the people are going to take that idea, 10 of us, get you out to our town and get a straw poll analysis for you on that. So hold fire, we'll come back and tell you what we want you to do. And that's the power you have.
Or you set up a new one.
That's harder and slower. Get on with every issue. Get in there. Get 10 people to go into a town and say, we'll take an analysis. There, hold on. And they can't do anything about it.
But I think it's a very good point to get involved yourself. We don't want to get drawn into it, we don't have time. We've just got one more question, please, and then we'll have to stop on this one for now.
What if those of us who are prepared to stop paying council tax redirect that money we'd be paying for council tax to subsidising the farmers to produce food?
That's a really good idea.
If we redirect the money we'd be paying for council tax.
Yeah. I mean, I am speaking at a council tax rebellion conference in Goffinland. I think it's on the 27th, I think, of April. I will put the details on my website and on X. I'm sorry, I do X. It's at Sandi Adams 2030. But it is about a mass, rebellion in council tax and other taxes. So I'm hoping that will probably push it all a bit further. Yeah, because if we all do it, then it's a massive, powerful thing. Yeah.
That's a great note to end on. Sandi Adams, as always, an absolute mind of information.
Thank you.
So guys, what did you think to Sandi's talk? Because it's a pretty deep, dark rabbit hole to go down when you start looking at it. But it's quite clear that everything is adrift, and we start to understand what they're trying to achieve in the UK at present, and not just in the UK, but particularly in the UK where we're all based, and looking at the destruction of the farming and how that's all playing out. So thanks for taking time to listen to Sandi. Don't forget, like and share, and we'll catch up with you soon. Have a great day, guys. Mark the Bowlerhat Farmer.